change talk and commitment talk are actually very important to motivational interviewing. It's one of the research areas, and the research shows that when a person actually talks in commitment talk and saying that they actually will do something, they've actually decided to do it, that actually correlates to behavior change. But the broader concept in motivational interviewing is called change talk. And there are all kinds of change talk. Either sometimes the client will volunteer it and say, oh, if I don't do something about this, I'm going to lose my job, or they'll volunteer change talk. Or the practitioner will elicit it. What concerns you the most about this? And there are many strategies to elicit change talk. Change talk comes in quite a number of categories and strengths. Commitment talk is the strongest. Commitment's the sense of the resolve. I've looked at it all. I'm doing it. But let me point something out about motivational interviewing as well. A practitioner in motivational interviewing is also willing to accept that the client has looked at the whole situation, and like the example I gave before, and decided not to change. I don't care if I live less, I'm drinking. I looked at all of these negatives and positives, but I'm not going to make a change. So that the responsibility is really the client's responsibility. And one way that is conveyed is that when clients do give sometimes some kind of talk about, well, I'm really not going to do this, I don't want to do it, or whatever, that in a very neutral way, one has to be very careful in motivational interviewing about tone. So in a very neutral way, the practitioner might say, you're right about that. It's really going to be up to you whether you decide to change or not. But that is a really strongly held belief by the practitioner, that the client really has to decide to do this and make this change. We can't make them do it. And in many of our practices across the country, I've taught many different models, people feel in a position of having to make people change. And if they're not able to do that, they feel that they're not accomplishing and they're not successful. When in fact, motivational interviewing looks at it from the other perspective. It's the client's responsibility. They need to make the decision to make a change or not. And they'll sometimes just put that out there. It's called emphasizing personal choice and control. It's really up to you. I'm not going to be able to do this for you. No one else can do it. Change talk falls within a number of different categories and different strengths. One of the acronyms in change talk is DARN, D-A-R-N, and it stands for desire to change. I'd like to if I could, maybe, which could be very weak change talk. The A stands for ability. I could do this if I decided to. I'm not sure if I could do it. It has the ability category. R stands for reasons. Well, if I did it, I'd feel better, I'd have more energy, or I have to do this because I'm getting very sick now. That would be reasons. And N stands for need. I've got to do this because, I need to. I'm not functioning as well as I like to. I'm not feeling as well, etc. And that could also be weak and strong. So they have sort of like a scale from 1 to 5. So a weak talk and desire might be, well, it would be good if things were different, versus I would really like things to be different, versus I really want things to be different. So that there are different degrees here. One might be a 1, a 3, a 5 as far as the strength of change talk. So when we talk about commitment talk, one wants to respond to any weak change talk that the client may bring up and try to continue on talking about it and help to strengthen that talk. So help the client to recognize stronger reasons of desire, stronger reasons of ability, stronger ability possibilities, stronger needs, etc. So that would be a directive process of motivational interviewing. And motivational interviewing includes a lot of strategies to do that. One would be evocative questions, where one would simply try to ask questions. That would be, what really concerns you about this? Or, for example, what would be the worst outcome if you don't make a change? Now, I might get somebody to give me a stronger answer than I wish things would change here, but I don't know if I could do it. So that the strategy is really directive and pull for stronger answers. There are other categories of change talk as well. These are problem recognition. If I don't do something about this, I could go to jail if I hit my wife again, or concern. I'm really worried about my drinking because my kids see me drunk. It really bothers me. That's a different level than problem recognition. Advantages of change. Well, if I change this, I'd feel better. My children wouldn't see me drunk. I'd, have a much better life, and determination. And that, again, is whether the person wants to do it, and confidence. Could I do this if I decide to do it? And there are sometimes two ways. There are two scales that one might measure a client on, and that would be, or from a 1 to 10, where would you say you are in thinking that you need to change this? So the client might give themselves a 3 or a 4. And you might say, well, why did you pick a 4 and not a 1? And the client will give you change talk. Say, well, I already know I have to do it because of these reasons. And what would bring you to an 8 from a 4? And the client will give you more change talk. Well, if it got this bad or that bad, I was coughing blood or that happened, then I'd have to go to an 8. And what would your life look like if you were a 10? And the client might say something like, I'd be healthy, all the advantages of change would come out. So these are some kinds of strategies to do this. But then the two scales are, if one uses readiness and confidence, one would ask the person to score themselves where they feel right now in making the change. And then they would ask themselves to score themselves on how confident they are that they could do it. So you might have a client who's very high on the need to do it. I really have to, I'd say I'm an 8. I need to do this. But very low on the confidence. How confident are you? I'm a 1. I tried to quit 10 times before and it didn't work. I really don't have a lot of confidence about this, So, and it gives the practitioner a gauge of where the work really needs to happen. I'm ready and willing, but I don't have any confidence here. Which brings me to another matter, as far as change is concerned. And that is in how we design plans of action that really should, well, not should, I don't like the word should, but that and where we want to include only things that the client is willing to do. That's why the collaboration comes in again, as far as how are we going to work on this from here. If the client tried self-help meetings 10 times and stopped going, and doesn't really want to go, we don't want to put that in a plan. It's only going to create another experience of failure. So that's where the collaboration around planning also comes in, when a person reaches some degree of wanting to change, and that would be, what do you think would work for you? What are your ideas about that? That's where collaboration comes in again. And the client might say, well, aren't you supposed to tell me? You're the professional, And the practitioner would say, I'll be very happy to give you all my suggestions, but I just want to know anything you've thought of at all. You really want to draw from the person. And usually the person has things, well, I'm not going to be able to hang out with my brother-in-law if I'm going to quit drinking, because we always drink together. They know more things about the day-to-day issues around the behavior than a physician might know. And the physician knows more about what kinds of aids there might be in assisting this, et cetera. And that's where our Elicit, Provide, Elicit would come in again. But in the change plan itself, one wants to know with some degree of certainty that the client feels that they could actually do these things and they want to do these things. These are things they'd like to try. However, if they change their mind, there's flexibility in that. They could come back and say, I thought about that. I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm not going to be able to do that one. And that's okay. It's called the menu of options in the change process, because it also conveys hope. Because if the 4 or 5 things that we picked out to do don't work out, there's another 5,000 we could select from. It's not just this program and that agency and that doctor. There are a lot of different things that the person could do to embark upon the change process. And that one, just like, is the motivator real? that we talked about before, this is another area in where change falls down. An unacceptable plan of action. We've created a plan of action that I don't really want to do. I don't go to gyms. And every time I have a plan of action, we have the gym in there, and I don't go. So we have to get the gym out of there. We have to find something else that suffices for the gym. And again, so that is a deterrent to change as well. Okay, so just to review this a little bit, change talk comes in a number of different categories and different strengths. One wants to listen for it actively and reinforce it by reflecting it, putting it in what we call a summary at the end of a session, asking for elaboration. Tell me more. This person says, one thing that really bothers me is that my kids saw me drunk. Tell me about that. When was the last time that happened? The more detail the person gives you, the less likely that it can recede into the background. So that we reinforce change talk. We put it into what they call double-sided reflection. So on the one hand, the drinking fills a lot of needs in your life, but on the other hand, you don't like your children seeing you drunk. You don't like the fact that your wife is nagging you, she's threatening to leave you. And we continually go over this list of reasons to change until that list becomes more overwhelming, or certainly stronger than the reasons to stay the same, which moves toward the resolution of ambivalence, where the person says, you know what, I got to change this. The benefits are much less than the detriments, and I'm really going to have to do something about it. So that's the directive element where change talk is brought into the situation and becomes a strategy, which is a directive strategy for the practitioner and moves the person along to change. Now, I want to say something about ambivalence because in the stages of change, the stage of contemplation where the person sees both sides but really can't move yet is called ambivalence. And lots of times in our society in general, we'll say, look at that person. I mean, their whole life is falling apart. How could they not be sure they want to change? It's laughable. But in the stages of change model, ambivalence is considered normal. It's the normal decision-making process that brings the person to the intrinsic decision of there's more negatives than positives. They need to look at it, examine it, come up with the reasons why it's negative for themselves to reach that decision. It's not the part of the change process that we could just skip over. If we do that, then we need to coerce or bribe the person into change because they haven't really decided upon it. And that's where when we talk about motivational interviewing being faster or slower, if a person changes, you can get a person to change, threaten to put them in prison or whatever we're going to do to them, take their kids away, and they'll do all the things they need to do until that is lifted, until the external pressure is lifted. I have my kids back now. I'm back to drugs and drinking because I never saw this as a problem in the first place. The court saw it as a problem. So now all of this work and change and treatments I went through and court expenses and children, the disruption of their lives taken away, coming back, is all eradicated because I never really went through that decision-making process where I said, I have to stop this. And this is my decision, and I'm going to go to these treatments. So when we talk about expedience, we need to look at the bigger picture and change.